version of this is that they are undefeated in their league. Big, heavy results, pretty well across the board, and or narrow wins. But the bottom line is they're doing really well results-wise. They obviously in the Champions League also had a huge win, 4-1 away to Leipzig, and then they drew Celtic. You hinted that results may be deceiving. Can you elaborate on that and why that's the case?
Yes, so it's interesting. This is again one of those situations where I have to play the stats nerd role that say, yeah, things are not as nice as they look. So you get these good results from Shakhtar in the Champions League, but then you look at underlying metrics. You look at the shots they took versus the shots that their opposition in Champions League took. You look at the expected goals, and then you see that Shakhtar was pretty efficient. Like, to give you an example, they beat Leipzig 4-1, and they scored 4 goals from 5 shots. That's the kind of efficiency that's not very... And by the way, it's like scored 4 from 5 shots and 3 entries into the box. So it's it's just one of those results that is not very sustainable. Then against Celtic, it was actually more lopsided because at least I guess against Leipzig, they got counterattacking opportunities. They could get into really good they got some really nice chances, even if they were not many. Celtic actually kept them at bay even better. They didn't. They were barely able to get good shots off. They still got that goal. They still got 1 goal out of it, but it was 5 shots versus 16 shots from Celtic. So all in all, if you look at all the numbers, at the shots, at the territorial dominance, at the possession, these are not games that Shakhtar controlled. These are games where Shakhtar resisted, and they resisted being dominated, and they managed to be more efficient than their opponents, which, to be honest, this is something that Real Madrid fans will understand. I think will understand quite well.
I was going to say, I was literally going to swoop to Shakhtar Donetsk's defense because I have sympathy and empathy for being criticized for getting results when, quote unquote, you didn't deserve it or you got lucky and stuff. So I have not watched Shakhtar Donetsk play this season. I saw highlights of the Leipzig game. So I'm not necessarily in a great position to assess either way, but I will always sympathize with teams who win and then get criticized for not deserving to win. So props to Shakhtar. You're winning games. That's all that matters. We'll see what the process unfolds. And I will say, if they somehow get out of this group stage, I think a lot of people, myself included, I think you as well, you and I did a big Champions League preview early on when the draw was initially made. They were probably the last, if we had to guess, they'd come last in this group, right? Celtic are a pretty good team.
At the bottom of the group.
Yeah. And I think that's not irrational prediction at all. And even if this comes true and Leipzig somehow advance, it's going to go against what was really supposed to happen based on the talent on paper and the way all these 4 teams have shaped up. So they've, so far so good. They're in a position to actually squeak away with this. Although obviously when you play 2 games against Real Madrid in a row, we'll see where they'll be after that. In terms of what you expect to see from a tactical perspective from them, is this a game that's going to be... Is this one of those games that Vinicius and Rodrigo and Fede Valverde and Benzema can lick their lips in the space behind, or is this going to be something that's more difficult to break down?
I would say that it's going to be more straightforward to break down. Even when you look at the games that they had versus Celtic and Leipzig were not having issues going through their block. In the end, what saved Shakhtar is really their box defending. Their defenders were quite good at clearing things away from the box. The keeper was stopping. What was saving Shakhtar in these situations was their box defense. But their actual block wasn't exactly hard to pass through for either Leipzig or for Celtic. And I wouldn't expect therefore Real Madrid to have that many issues. So like you can expect, I would say that if say Real Madrid, if there's an upset and Real Madrid loses, expect them to lose in a very kind of a bit like Sheriff last year, where they're dominating, they're trying to create shots. Maybe not in the most efficient fashion or whatever, but it's like they've made enough to win, but it just doesn't get there because in the end, the Ukrainians are clearing everything that comes into their box. That's the kind of game, that's the kind of situation where Real Madrid might be stuck in. You might even be stuck in a similar loop to what happened against Osasuna, where you end up crossing into the box frequently without getting much of a result. But from a perspective of actually going through their block, Celtic and Leipzig didn't have too many issues with that. I wouldn't expect Real Madrid to have issues with that because they have the thing with Shakhtar is that they're this team that in the Ukrainian league they are set to press high, to take the ball up high, and to be very aggressive. Then in Champions League, they try to be more conservative, but the team is not really drilled for that. So you have these situations, and they happen. And you could see that against Leipzig or against Celtic, where you have that unholy grail of the higher defensive line, but that's not pressing, which makes it really easy for you to send the long ball in behind their defense. You can sometimes see them be stuck in those kinds of situations. There, it's one of those things where they don't fully commit to the low block, they don't fully commit to the high press, and they end up doing neither well. So at least in those two games versus Celtic and Leipzig, they were often stuck in that kind of situation, which is really one of the worst situations to be in defensively, because they end up like it can be easy to overpass them with a long ball. Their lines sometimes are even kind of rigid in the sense that players don't know when do they go push up to press and when do they stay in position. So there are still issues in how well drilled and organized that block is. So there will be openings in between lines. Something that happened also against Celtic and Leipzig is that they keep the kind of 4-1-4-1 block really narrow. So they give a lot of space on the wings. And if you give that kind of space, I'm curious to see what will happen against Real Madrid, because you cannot give Vinicius, for example, that amount of space or he will destroy you. So I wonder if they will do anything specific for Vinicius, if they will, for example, adjust their block to defend a bit more wide against Vinicius, because they will need that.
Yeah, limiting space and throwing multiple bodies to prevent cut-ins towards Vinicius I truly believe there's no 100% blueprint to stop Vinicius, but you also have to do the right things to make sure you limit the damage he'll cause and to limit his moments and his chances, because Vinicius has proven that he could score from one good moment in a game. But I think what you want to do is basically limit the amount of times he can hurt you. Everything you're describing about Shakhtar is it sounds like they're just Real Madrid, the Ukrainian Real Madrid.
Yes.
Getting the results, being efficient, being more conservative in the Champions League, confusion defensively between the lines, who's marking who. Some people press, some people don't. I'm a fan. I'm now a fan of Shakhtar Donetsk for that reason. In terms of,
and that's the thing. You think about all this, and it's the typical Real Madrid analysis of I see a bunch of tactical issues, but they can still somehow get the result. So despite all the issues that I comment about Shakhtar, I wouldn't be surprised about an upset. And it's just one of those things that really boils down to psychology, the mental side, and players being able to execute really well despite being in tactically unfavorable situations. And again, anyone who's watched Real Madrid is quite familiar with these situations. Even if the tactics can be a bit messy or it gets a bit chaotic, the players are still quite solid and not making too many and not making mistakes. I think we are seeing this situation a lot with Shakhtar. The players might have that extra, because of the whole situation, because the whole war in Ukraine, the players might have that extra motivation to play for their club, to play for their country, and to show what they can do. So I do think there's an extra motive on the motivation and mental side that makes these players execute well despite the tactical issues.
In terms of key players,